Welcome. So I'm really excited to have you here, Vika. We have known each other for how long now? Gosh. 20 years?
Yeah, something wild like that, 17 to 20.
Yeah, yep. So we met at Georgia Tech. So I was playing basketball and studying at Georgia Tech, and you were there. And I'll let you share your story in a second. And we, crossed paths, and we went off in our own directions. And I was playing basketball. You were doing your stuff in New York and being a big-time executive. And we crossed paths again when I was visiting New York. And then, we just sort of struck up that friendship again, and we've just been going back and forwards, and I've caught up with you in California a few times, and we just developed a really special relationship. So I'm just super excited to have you here and have a chat with you today about men's work and all things men's work and more. So I guess first, I would love for you just to share your story. You know, why is a woman on here talking about men's work, and who are you? Who's Vika? I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Luke. It is such a joy to come back together. Really, we met when we were babies, and now to be so passionate about the same topics, and not just passionate, but deep advocates of men's work feels really cool that I can share that with you. My story. So I was born in the former Soviet Union. We came over as white card political asylum refugees, and we were raised in Atlanta, Georgia, which was like an incredible place. Went to Georgia Tech. I'm one of 3 girls. Dad was my best friend. Best memories of my childhood were fishing amongst him and his friends. And I ended up graduating into the worst economic recession of our time, 2008. And so I bought a one-way ticket to Vietnam, and I started backpacking, and that just gave me this tremendous perspective on life, because at the same time my dad had left the family. He had an affair and he divorced my mom, and so I was backpacking totally heartbroken. Ended up in New York. My sister was working in advertising, so she was like, "You've got a personality for sales, just do this." And I did it, and I did it big for almost 7 years. It was just wonderful, but it was a lot of storytelling and sales and very little soul or spiritual development. But I had this vision that if I saved up for 7 years, every commission check, then I could buy my freedom. And sure enough, at the end of those nearly 7 years, I left to go backpacking around the world. And for 28 months, I solo trekked and did a lot of things in the pursuit of perspective. So I studied with masters across Eastern philosophy, mindset, meditation, breath work. I did a little bit of aid work, went to work at a refugee camp in Greece, an orphanage in Cambodia. I did a whole lot of thawing out of the corporate wheel. And in the midst of this, very tragically, my grandfather died. And that brought me to LA for the first time. And I found myself in deep grief and acute depression with no friend, family around, navigating the loss of the most important man in my life, which brought up the festering wounds of the father that had not fully been healed from a decade before. And so it was in this space of deep pain that my guy friends really showed up for me, particularly the 2 men who were my roommates. And we would have these kind of nightly campfires and talk about life and cryptocurrency and masculinity and feminism. And it felt akin to those fishing trips from childhood. And as I was kind of gaining my strength and going back on the road as a speaker, I decided, what if I just cook dinner for my closest guy friends in whatever city I'm in? And we recorded these conversations. We agreed to be visiting professors in each other's lives. And over the course of a year, maybe, I would gather enough interesting conversations to make it into a book. Well, fast forward 3 years later, we've got about a dozen of these dinners, from Tel Aviv to Berlin to LA, New York, Melbourne, Sydney.
Yes.
Sydney, yeah, very cool. And I started speaking on stage about re-examining I called it modern manhood. But truly it's a reexamination on a societal, cultural, and familial level of what it means to be a man. And every time I got into an Uber, the first question I would ask after establishing some friendly rapport is, what does it mean to be a man? And I asked if these men would be willing to be part of my research. So I've collected hundreds of hours of primary research data at this point from men all over the world, asking them a series of questions that helps me as a woman understand the unknown in ways that I never really could have before. And so when I committed to doing this full time, a few men approached me and a very unlikely career as a men's coach emerged. And I say coach with almost like a contraction because that word carries weight for some people. And for me, it wasn't about coaching. It was about educating. It was about being a guide into unknown lands. Because when I left the corporate world and jumped off into the unknown, I had a few guides that reassured me that things were going to be okay if I was brave enough to jump and trust. And I thought that's so valuable. And what I recognized in my lifetime of befriending men from all different walks of life, from, immigrant Russian friends to athletes that I tutored at Georgia Tech to corporate America, is that men really relish a relationship with a woman who they see as an equal and counterpoint, to sit in the mud of their mind with them and help them with the sense making of the big and small life decisions. Someone who brings a different perspective than the homogenous one that they're used to. And so it really is life advisory. That's what I call it. It's about cultivating emotional intelligence at the same time that you cultivate emotional intimacy. And I call it relational wealth. So I used to work in college for a financial firm, and it astounded me that people would spend thousands and thousands of dollars for a financial wealth advisor. When really, if you look at what has the highest dividends of happiness, the largest study ever conducted on happiness was by Harvard, and they surveyed 700 men over 75 years, and they found that the single greatest factor affecting one's happiness is the quality of their relationships. And I thought, why don't we have relational wealth advisors? Why don't we have people that are focused on the ecosystem of cultivating and maintaining relationships, not just externally facing, but internal to yourself? And so that's my work. And as a storyteller, I marry those two worlds with what are the stories that you believe to be true about yourself, and how can you become more aware of the stories that aren't yours, that have been imposed on you by your family, by your culture, and by your society, that actually aren't serving your highest potential. And when you can see those stories for what they are, you recognize that you have a choice to write your own. And so that is my highest joy, is empowering people to write their own story in real time and giving them a communication toolbox and an emotional intimacy toolbox. I work with men and women to do this. It's just that my focus for the last 3 years has been men, and it's driven by this dinner salon project, which is now the book that I'm writing. So that's the long story.
Beautiful. No, there's a whole lot to unpack there. I guess the first thing, well, a lot of things that come to mind as you're talking, but the first thing that comes to mind is when we're talking about what men are kind of craving and what they get out of these salon dinners that you're putting together. We're talking about men's work. Why do you think that this is? You're talking about changes in society. Why do you think that traditionally men don't have this? What do you think it is that's created this environment where men feel, I don't know, whether it's alienated or they feel like they can't express their emotions? You talked about emotional intelligence. Why do you think that this has been created? What do you think is happening in the world that doesn't allow for men to be able to, I guess, inhabit that space, which, we talk about statistics about the suicide rate of men is extraordinarily high. Mental health issues is really high with men. And a lot of it is around what you speak about with not being able to share their feelings, not having that emotional intelligence or a space to be able to, I guess, dive deeper into what's going on within themselves. So, what do you think it is that's creating that, I guess, environment for men?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The CDC recently put out that men have a suicide rate of 3.65x higher than women. And when I've studied with gender teachers from John Gray to Warren Farrell, what I've noticed is that men are really in a state of crisis, and not one that they've asked for, but one that, frankly, the patriarchy has supported and encouraged for its own gains. If you look back to the origins of man 300,000 years ago, and Jack Donovan talks about this in his book, The Way of Men. So the way of men was a man's ability to survive and thrive depended on his small tribe of men. They all worked together to hunt, to kill, to provide food for the families. And women were really meant to take care of the home, nurture, and take care of the young. And so as we've evolved as a society, and I think the breakaway point was the advent of birth control in the 1960s and the feminist revolution through the 70s, what's happened in the last couple of years is that society is changing faster than men can wrap their heads around. And when a man loses his sense of dignity, and I think about it like this, like, I'm not saying this is the truth, I'm saying this is the story. The story is that man's highest identity is connected to his competence. Women's highest identity is connected to her nurture. So if women are just as powerful as men right now, and we're climbing the ranks in corporate, and we're able to do it all, quote unquote, having the kids and running the businesses, then why do men have a role? What is their purpose anymore? They're not the only ones providing meal. They're not the only ones providing finances. And so I think that the deep loss of identity is what we're seeing expressed in mental health pandemic. Loneliness is at an all-time high. A recent Gallup study found that when asked how many people you could cry to, people said less than 1.9. So, and that was pre-COVID. So what we're experiencing right now is a third of men regularly feel lonely. And in the space of feeling lonely, men react very differently than women do. They contract and they go into the cave of the mind. Women know that nurture and community will pull them forward. And so I think what's so special about the work that I have stumbled upon that I didn't even know was so necessary, because dinner salons, gosh, I've been doing that with my family since we were kids. We would always have friends over for dinner. When I bring together 4 to 8 men who have never met each other, there is that inherent competitive aspect of sizing each other up. And it takes an immense amount of, I'd say, energetic ninja-ing to get them in the first few minutes to a space where we're all working toward a common goal, which is being visiting professors in each other's lives. And what has
I like that, sorry. Energetic ninja-ing.
Energetic ninja.
You are definitely an energetic ninja for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Sorry, go on.
Because I really try to bring men together that would never be friends, because I think that the wisdom is woven in the stories, and the stories are truest in range of diverse experiences. So I'll bring together a Russian immigrant friend, I'll bring together a Muslim friend, a Hispanic friend, a Black friend, and all of a sudden we're seeing the nuances of masculinity emerge, not in a lecture, not in a book, but in true life stories. And that's so powerful. And what's amazed me is not once have I done this dinner salon and at the end the men didn't hug, didn't exchange numbers, and didn't ask me, how can we all stay in touch? Which just shows me how hungry men are for that sense of community. And because they haven't been given a chance to explore community outside of the sport realm, which I'm really curious about from your perspective, how that's different. This is community of vulnerability. This is community of commitment to their highest possibility. This is a community that is dedicated to the unfurling of self, which can be terrifying and overwhelming, because what I've noticed is if something hurts, men especially tighten it into a ball, throw it into the attic of the mind, and never want to touch it again, for fear that if they do, it will unravel into thousands of spiders that they won't be able to take care of. But that fear becomes crippling, turns into shame. That shame becomes paralyzing and turns into an expression very often of vices that become destructive. So there's a very clear downward trajectory of what happens if we don't talk about the things that hurt. And sometimes it's safer to do that when it's led by a woman, because men learning from men will always be important. Women learning from women will always be important. But the way I think about this is men's work and women's work, they're two wingtips of the same bird. And when we flap both, we soar. So some of my greatest teachers are men. And what I really hope our conversation explores is, why is it important to cross-pollinate insights from women to men? So that's the long and short of it. I'm curious for you, what made you understand that this work was not only important for you to do for yourself, but important for you to share and bring awareness to a larger community? How has men's work changed your life?
Yes, well, thanks for that question. I was waiting for it to turn around onto me. I knew it wasn't going to take long with you, Vika.
Had to warm you up. Had to take it slow.
So for me, I think you used that word, stumbled upon men's work, and that's literally what happened to me. I guess I could take you back to, you spoke about how you went away, you did trips to India, you traveled all around the world, and you kind of found out about this work. This is when I was still playing basketball, and that was it. I was just a typical, I guess in America you call them jocks, where it was just basketball, and that was the most important thing, and that's all that I cared about. And then as I guess I got towards the end of my career, I started, my body was breaking down, and I was like, well, hang on a sec, I can't keep doing this forever. There's going to be something beyond this, and I started looking at different avenues, and I guess towards the end of my career, I realized that as my body was breaking down, I wasn't handling that well mentally. And I realized that it was causing me a lot of anxiety, and I'd get out in the court and I couldn't do the things that I used to do. And I had all my, self-worth wrapped up into my performance on the court. And all of a sudden I couldn't perform like I used to. And, where does that leave me and my self-worth? So I struggled with that a lot, and I started to get into ways to deal with my anxiety, started to get into meditation, mindfulness. And I guess from there, when I retired from basketball, I just kind of felt very lost, and I knew it was going to happen, and I put stuff into place. But even then, I was still a bit kind of like, whoa, what do I do now? And I was traveling around, and I went to a festival in Tasmania, and that festival that you actually spoke at a couple of years later.
To you.
New Kind Festival. And there was an Indigenous man there that he was doing some stuff around men's work, and he spoke about the men's work that he does in his community in Tasmania, and just how powerful it is, how healing it is for his community. Spoke about how, his ancestors have done it for thousands of years. And it kind of got me thinking, okay, what is this men's work? We did some stuff for circle work where we got to share our story, and I thought, this is pretty cool. So I came back to Adelaide, and just started to look more into it, listen to podcasts. And for me also, when I came back to Adelaide, I grew up here down south on the Fleurieu Peninsula. I left here when I was 16 to go play basketball for a career, and I'd come back at sort of 36, 37 years old, and it completely changed. I didn't know anyone, so I was sort of craving for that connection to community. So I felt like, well, there's this men's group happening back here in southern Adelaide. It's a chance for me to connect with like-minded men. I've heard about how great that work is for healing communities and healing men, and I just thought, all right, I'll go check it out, see what it's like. And I guess that's where I started going to the Southern Men's Group. Every second week we'd meet up on a Tuesday night and talk all things about what's going on with ourselves. And when I first went to it, it was more about I didn't feel like I needed to go for myself. It was more about I just wanted to go to check it out. What can I pick up for it? I'm a teacher, so what can I take back as a teacher with my students? I didn't realise that I was probably going there more for myself than I was for anything else. And I guess, now that I've been going to these men's groups, I've just realised how beautiful it is for men to be able to, I guess, articulate what it is that is going on for themselves. And that's, for me, something that I get a lot out of it. I'm very bad at kind of articulating my feelings and thoughts, and especially in front of other men. I might be able to do it with a partner or with someone that I'm very close to, but you get into a big group of people and men, and I just sort of shut down. So it's been great to be able to, sort of go through what's going on in my life. And, you spoke about with your, what do you call them? Your dinners. What's
the
your
visiting professors?
No, the dinners that you have with your men's groups.
They're called Brave New Men Dinners.
Brave New Men Dinners. And you spoke about how it's important to create a space where men feel comfortable to express themselves. And as a woman, you're able to sort of do that energetically. And I think the men's group is a great way to create that safe space where men can express themselves. And it really is important to create that space. So there's, certain guidelines around men's work through the men's group that I'm involved with, where we create these sort of guidelines which allows for people to share themselves more vulnerably, to dive a bit deeper into what's going on with our lives. And, for myself, and I've seen it in others, it's just, really beautiful time, beautiful space to be in.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your story. I imagine that a big part of it may have also surprised you. Like, you thought you were going there for your students, and then you actually found maybe parts of you that needed healing that you had just tucked away so deep and so far back. What was one of the most noticeable changes that you felt after consistently doing men's work for a little bit?
Yeah, I think for me, it was, I felt more comfortable, I guess, being myself around other men. I guess growing up playing basketball, you're around, athletes. We're all, we don't want to show any vulnerability, because vulnerability means that we're not going to be able to support our teammates. If we're out in the battlefield of the court, and we're vulnerable or things aren't going well for us, then we can't support our teammates. So there's always this kind of, I guess, undercurrent of everything's fine, there's nothing wrong with us, we're all good, we're all on top of everything. So I just sort of built this, I guess, story in my head that when I'm around a group of men, that I can't be vulnerable and I can't tell them what's going on with myself. So it allowed me to create these great connections with other men, to actually be more vulnerable and show sides of myself that I'm not comfortable, I guess, expressing in front of other men. And it's gone on into my work life and other areas. I'm sort of not as worried about showing my insecurities in front of other people, and it allows me just to be more authentic around other people in my life.
That sounds so liberating.
Yeah, it is. It's still a work in progress, but it's. I don't think you can ever be perfect at anything. So it's just one of those things, I guess, on the top of my head that I get out of men's work. I'm curious to ask you, What are some of the things that you do to create that safe space for men to be able to express themselves? Because, with the men's work here, so we've got these certain guidelines with the men's gathering that's coming up. We have these guidelines that help create that safe space. What are some of the things that you do to, energetically ninja your way into creating this safe space for men?
Yeah, so in my dinners or in my practice one-on-one with students, I think they need to understand the bigger picture, the larger intention, that they are part of something that is in service to a greater cause than just their own. And so what I have done, and I did this right before my very first dinner in New York, I wrote an email that had a mission statement. Like, I'm on a mission to understand the unknown. I'm on a quest as a woman to explore what it means to be a man, because I believe that when men can feel, they can heal, and all of society up levels. And so just inviting people into that space, I think really changes the game. What I also do is I actively participate. So any questions that I'm asking of them, I've got to also be willing to put my neck on the line and answer, how has your perspective of manhood changed over the course of your life? And that's a hard thing to say to a group of great men, because so much of the work I do is because I've experienced what it feels like to be on the receiving end of men with very low integrity, physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, emotionally assaulted by men. And that's, my story is not unique. Almost every woman I know has experienced the most terrifying sides of what manhood in its darkest hour looks like. And when I share that this is my way of showing that's the exception to the rule, that's not the rule. And I'm here to gather the stories of goodness, the stories of deep humility, the stories of triumph, overcoming. Then men get a sense that their sharing is serving the teaching of the generation that will be reading this book. So that's the first thing I do, is I clearly articulate the mission. The second thing I do is something that I learned as I was backpacking, and it's really the power of presence and eye gazing. So I know who the alpha men are in the room, and I'll pair them right up together, and I
can feel the men right now watching this just tensing up right now. What are you talking about, eye gazing?
Yeah, but it is amazing because, the reason I ask each of the guys as we sit in the circle on my living room floor, why did you say yes to this? And almost every single time it's because I trust you, because you're crazy and I know you're working on something big, and because I'm curious. And so I think if you can have that, if you can have a space where people are safe to explore novelty, oh my gosh, that's so exciting, because most of us, men and women, are bored out of our minds with the mundane. So if you can create a space for magic in the mundane, and it's as simple as having them look into each other's eyes, and because I write poetry and do spoken word, that experience goes deeper with the backdrop of a spoken word piece. And so it's really fine tuning kind of all the emotional strings in a very easy way that instantly slices through the bullshit and gets men to recognize, like, okay, all of the masks that you walked in with, they're not welcome here. You won't survive another minute. So that's the second thing I do. I think the third thing I do is I let the stories speak for themselves. And so when I ask tough questions, there's always one person that will bravely answer, and that person sets the tone. And I'm curious if that's how it is also in your men's circles.
Yeah, I think it's good. I'm loving hearing you talking here, because I feel like every men's group, every men's circle, every men's work, there's different ways to go about it. There's no set way of doing these things. So I'm loving hearing how you go about it. Keep going.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, there's definitely elements that are like the secret sauce that unless you're in the room, you won't know. But what I'm willing to share is something that I hope gets copied and replicated, dozens of times over, because if you can do the emotional jujitsuing of energetically setting the space, you're giving such a gift to everybody walking in. And when I first started doing this, I had not ever known how to properly facilitate. And then over the course of the last 3 years, you just learn by doing. And recently I took a course up at Berkeley on how to really properly facilitate. For 4 days, we learned how to do that. And it's the tiniest ability to be thoughtful and preemptive. It's a level of empathy that most people won't even notice. But if you do it right, it's almost like you're like a little elf on Christmas Eve. And so a lot of it is also the ability to laugh. Bringing people back into their childlike state in order to go deep will succeed so much further than bringing people into a space of pain or obligation, because then they'll contract. So, games are another great way to lighten this up. Mixing up the cadence, so doing like a popcorn round and then like long form storytelling, using props that people can like tangibly hold on to. One of the ceremonies that I really enjoy is I have candles for every single one of the men, and these candles have been lit over and over by the same dinners all over the world. So they're really special. And it's part of our closing ceremony is that we honor someone in our lives who was a visiting professor who made a tremendous impact on us, who's no longer physically present. And that's just so beautiful. So I think tradition is a really powerful ingredient to help create that psychological space, and introducing the dinner and the show flow of what to expect with a few surprises helps, because then instead of them being on edge and anxious, they're like, oh, okay, so first we're going to tell stories about how we became the men that we are. And then we're going to go into like a popcorn round of questions, and then we're going to eat. And then there's going to be this like closing ceremony. Cool. I can handle that. So if you're ever leading people through something unknown, it's a very fine line between uncertainty and clarity.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love to hear different ways it's being done, because here in Adelaide we've got a whole bunch of men's groups. There's a whole heap that I didn't even know existed, and there's different ways of going about it. So there's people that just get together at a pub, drink some beers, and talk a bit of crap, and that's great. There's other men's groups that have sheds where they just go into the shed, they'll make something, they'll just talk over making stuff. The men's group that I'm involved with, it's a bit more kind of sit down, a bit more structured the way we go about it. We have a few guidelines that help with just being able to express ourselves, and just little things like there is no one's trying to fix anyone in the group. So it's not like a counselling session. It's not like if you came to the group and said, I'm really struggling with my boss, and my boss is really just getting on my nerves and rah, rah, rah. I don't turn around and be like, well, have you tried to go talk to your boss? And have you said to your boss that, because we're not there to fix, we're just there to listen. And the power of listening is just incredible in the men's group that I'm involved with, just hearing other men's stories and just realising that, we're all going through our crap. We're all going through different things. A lot of the times we're going through the same things, which we didn't even realise. And just hearing other men's stories and how they go about it, and how they, the tools that they use. So many times I'll listen to someone talking and be like, I'm going through that same thing. And then they'll say, oh, but then I did this and I did that. And I think, wow, that's amazing. I'm going to try that now. So that's one part of it, is not being there to fix or be fixed either. We're not there to get the answer. We're just there to try and share our story, I guess. And the other thing is talking from the I statements, which I found a bit confronting at first, but I've realised the importance of it over time. And with the I statements, it's all about what I'm experiencing, and what you made that comment before about. You talked about how you experience things. It's not necessarily the truth, but it's your truth. And that's one thing that we talk a lot about with the men's group here, is that, I could experience something like talking about my boss saying, my boss is on me again, and called me today and they told me to, I guess, do, 2 pages of work that I just got no time for. And then I can say, when that happens and your boss, and you just want to go into your boss's office and just smack him in the face and knock him out. And then other men might be in the circle being like, no, I don't experience that myself. That's your experience. I don't ever feel that. That space of just those I statements of, I'm experiencing this, and when this happens, it's what's happening to me, and it's my reaction to it. And it also kind of, I guess, personalizes what we're saying, because a lot of the times, I know for myself, I used to talk about things that are happening, and I always talk about it as if it happens to men in general or to people in general, and never really own it as it's being my experience myself. So, there are a couple of, I guess, things that really help guideline-wise with the group. There's a whole heap of other stuff, but...
I'm so glad you share that, because that's so necessary in order for that space to continue being a place of healing. Because the truth is, we're all our own gurus. And what it sounds like is that when you create a space for someone to just self-express, they can come to their own path in their own time, rather than, again, being told what to do. I think we have to be really careful when we give advice if it's not asked for, because people are on a journey to find that truth, and it's not our business to tell them how to do so. It's such a individual process. Something that always astounds me about you, Luke, is that you went from textbook, one end of the spectrum, masculinity from the lens of a pro athlete, and not just like minor league pro athlete. I know. You're going to blush, but I really want to make this point. You spent 16 years of your life playing for some of the biggest teams on, high school, college, and then pro athlete levels. And everything that you learned was ingrained in you to survive, to succeed. And then you walk away from that career. And what did it feel like to have your sense of identity lost, to have your sense of what it means to be masculine gone?
It was extremely tough. Like I said before, I knew it was coming. Obviously, you can't play professional basketball for your whole career. For your whole life, sorry. My body was breaking down. I was constantly playing injured. I had a bunch of surgeries. Just always trying to come back from some sort of injury or coddling some sort of injury. And I knew my time was coming. I probably ended up playing maybe a year or two longer than I should have. My body really wasn't in any condition to be playing professional basketball the last couple of years, but was sort of mind over matter. And I had put in a lot of things into place to transition from basketball. I had a few friends that were older than me that had retired, and they just kept telling me, Luke, just make the most of it while you're playing. You don't realise how crazy it is afterwards. You don't realise how tough it is. I decided that I wanted to become a school teacher. I wasn't 100% sold on that's what I wanted to do, but I knew, because when I was playing basketball, that was it for me. Like I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else. That was my passion. That was my life. And then thinking about turning that passion somewhere else, I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. My first I guess, thought was just go straight into coaching. But then as I got towards the end of my career, I realised I really enjoyed doing the clinics at high schools. So we used to go to high schools and primary schools, and we would do basketball clinics and, do an hour-long clinic with the kids. And I really enjoyed that interaction with them, and just to see, the looks on their faces when they had, us come out and take them through drills and play games with them. And I remember those that are in Australia will know Tony Modra, who was, just a god in Adelaide. He was, the top footballer at the time for Adelaide Crows. And when I was in high school, he came out to visit my high school, and I'll never forget it. He came around. He was just an awesome bloke. He just was kicking the footy with us, just real down to earth, signed my footy, and just, just seeing someone that, I guess in my head, I always thought professional athletes were always really arrogant. They didn't care about anyone else. They just cared about themselves. And to see him come in and just be a normal bloke, normal person, and giving us the time of day, just really impacted me in a strong way. And I was like, well, I think that's great to be in that position, to be able to, go to the younger generation and show them their different ways to be as professional athletes or as adults. So I thought, maybe I can get into that teaching world. So I started studying. I was doing part-time studying while I was still playing. I still had probably, I guess, a year or two of study left after I finished playing basketball. So I just was doing that part-time while I'd finished. And for the first 6 months, I was loving life. It was amazing. I didn't have to force myself to go to training while I was injured. I didn't have to worry about the anxiety of not being able to go as hard as the younger guys, and trying to set an example to the younger guys about how to work hard while I'm just sitting there on the bike while they're out there running, going nuts on the court. The anxiety of like I mentioned before, of my whole self-worth was wrapped up in my ability to perform on the court. So I would, if I had a good game, I'd be on top of the world. I'd just be walking around like I'm the man, and I felt so resilient, and I just was in a really good space. I felt really clear, confident. And then the next week, if I had a bad game, boom, I was down. And, if we lost, or it was all around, if we lost a game, I always say it was my fault. And I've let my team down. I've let my coaches down. I've let my parents down. I've let all my coaches down that have ever coached me. There's this real kind of like real highs and real lows. And when I finished playing basketball, there just was no highs. There was no lows. But for that first 6 months, I loved it, because it was like all that pressure was just gone. It was like, I can get up in the morning and do what I want. I'm not forced to go to training. I'm not forced to train while I'm injured. I'm not forced to go out in front of 15,000 people and perform and have critics tell me I can't do this and can't do that. And I was like, all right, this is great. And then after about 6 months, I started to find that things in my life were bothering me a lot more than they used to. And I'd be like, why is this even bothering me? I don't normally care about this stuff. I've got mates that always used to say, like, I used to be resilient with a lot of other stuff in my life. And they'd be like, how does this not bother you? And I'd be like, I don't know. It's not a big deal to me. But because I didn't have basketball as my anchor and my focus, and anytime something peripheral was happening in my life that maybe was a bit negative or wasn't going how I liked, I always had basketball to pull me back into line with my focus and be like, well, that might not be working out, but I've got basketball to focus on now. I'm going to do that. That's my, number one focus. So it was always my anchor emotionally to come back to basketball. And then when that was gone, all these peripheral things started to really bother me. And I was getting these emotions that I hadn't felt before. And I was like, what is going on? And it took me another probably 6 months to realize that all these things that were now bothering me is because I didn't have basketball. I didn't have that focus. I wasn't 100% sure that I wanted to be a teacher. I was just doing part-time study, so I'd go for a few months without studying at all. And I'm just kind of floating around just in this real sea of perturbation and just not really knowing what's going on. Even though that I had foreseen that this was going to happen and I put things into place, I really drew on my meditation practices during that period. When I was still playing basketball, I was trying to deal with my anxiety. So I started to look more into mindfulness meditation stuff and went to a few Vipassana retreats. And that was really good when I finished my basketball career, when I was going through all those emotions. And I really relied heavily on my meditation practices to be able to just sit with it and just observe it, not get so caught up in what's going on inside me. And that helped me recognize that, okay, this is all happening because I don't have that anchor anymore. I guess that was a really tough time. And then the more I started studying and finishing off my teaching degree, I started doing a few placements in some schools. And I recognized that I really enjoyed it. I really loved interacting with the students. I loved that challenge, this new world of nothing to do with basketball at all. Learning about ways that students learning about ways to deliver different content. And when I got my first job as a teacher, I told the school, I said, I don't want to do basketball. I don't want to be a PE teacher. I don't want to do any of that stuff. I want to be in the classroom. I want to be doing something that I've never done before. I want to challenge myself. And it gave me that focus, and it really kind of, brought me back into myself. And really was a lifesaver in the end. It was a struggle, even though I knew it was coming and I thought I had things into place. It was still a really tough time to transition. And I guess, like you said, find a new level of what is my identity,
Yeah. Yes, that's my question. What is your North Star now? If basketball was your North Star in that iteration, Luke 1.0, what is Luke 2.0's North Star?
Yeah, I always talk about when I was playing basketball, I had goals. My goal was, all right, I want to get to the Australian Institute of Sport. And I got there and then I was like, okay, I want to play college basketball. Okay, so I went over to play college. Okay, I want to play NBA. All right, so I got the chance very briefly to play in the NBA. Okay, I want to play for Australia. I got a chance to play on a few Australian teams. So I always had these goals in mind. But one of the problems was, my goals were I want to play in the NBA for 10 years. So when I got there and it didn't work out, it was like, my self-worth was just dropped. Like, I'm no good. Not, holy crap, I just got a chance to play in the NBA. Like, how many people get a chance to play?
Not just for the NBA, but for like one of the premier, if not the most famous team in the NBA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, it was just recognizing that these goals are great to set, but they can also be limiting as well, because if things don't work out the way that I envisioned it or what I'd set myself to do, then I just sort of, drop in a heap and struggle with that. So for me, moving forward into this new phase of my life, it's more about setting intentions. So there's not like a particular pinpoint goal of this has to happen for me to be successful, or this has to happen for me to, be for my self-worth. So it's more about intentions, and I guess getting into this world of a teacher, it's more about, what is it that I can give back to the younger generation? And I guess it's all about becoming more authentic. If I can be my authentic self in front of the students, in front of other people, then I feel like that's the greatest medicine to give is to be myself. So I guess, my intention is to do this work to try and remove as many masks as possible and become my more authentic self. That's my intention, I guess, now.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're embodying it every day. Just even in this conversation, I know that this is new for you, and this was really stretching outside of your comfort zone. And you had great trepidation with me turning the mic on you, but what you...
Well, it's funny because I've turned down a lot of podcasts and stuff because I don't like that stuff at all. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that have seen this and be like, hang on, you told me you don't like doing this stuff. What are you doing it for? But it's also, like you're talking about, that emotional jiu-jitsu, that emotional ninja of yourself. I've always felt comfortable talking to you, and I knew that if I was going to do this, that you would probably be on top of my list because, you're able to create that space.
Oh, well, thank you for trusting me, because your story is phenomenal. And I think the reason why it's so phenomenal is because you cultivated a level of self-awareness that most people would just push aside and sit in their suffering and sit in their pain until it ate them alive. But when you recognize that that was happening, you found different modalities and tools. You found the mindful meditation to give you peace of mind, which frankly, like, I think peace of mind is the highest wealth that a human being can aspire for. I know some really wealthy, financially wealthy people who don't have peace of mind. And in my travels, I've met people who have very little finances and have deep peace and serenity within. And it shows. And so what I really appreciate about you sharing your story is that you never gave up on yourself, and you were open to the path pivoting in many different directions. And it also sounds like you listened to a higher intelligence. You know, multiple times you said, I knew it was coming. I knew it was happening. I planned for it. And that's kind of the nature of being human that we don't account for. We can intellectualize through anything. We can know cerebrally that, oh, this is going to be disappointing, or it's going to be hard to make this transition. But it's the tenderness and the self-compassion in that moment, not to make it worse by judging yourself for not handling it as well as you thought you should have. I thought that was really remarkable about your journey.
This is what I love talking about you. I'm able to just spew out all this garbage, and you can just turn it around and make it sound so beautiful and articulate it so well. So I appreciate that.
But you gave me all the raw material. I feel like we're cooking and you have the ingredients and I'm just sauteing them up.
I love it.
Wow.
I guess, well, one more question. I guess looking at time-wise, we sort of need to wrap it up soon, I guess, but I don't know where you're at with it. I don't really have a time constraint on this. But I guess I would like to ask you, if there was a man out there that was curious about men's work, wasn't sure about what it involves, or what sort of step they need to take, or what the beauty is on it, can you articulate it? I don't want to put any pressure on you on the spot, but what would you say to a man that is maybe curious, to what would be the first step, or what would you suggest to someone who is, I guess, wants to find out more about it, or what advice have you got?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I would hope that somebody listening is like, ooh, I want whatever Luke's having, because he was able to go from such extremes into a real place of peace. For me, men's work is about finding belonging within yourself and within a trusted community of like-minded men. For me, men's work is ancestral. It's the continuation of tradition of indigenous people, tribal peoples that came before us. For me, men's work is a commitment to becoming the best man that you can be, because you are now held publicly and physically in court of your peers. For me, men's work is also deeply personal and can look like a circle of men, or can look on like one-on-one work with a man or with a woman. For me, men's work is the realization that in order for you to become the highest version of what you see as possible for your life, you are not an island. You are not capable of doing it all the time. And men's work is there to hold you up when you feel low, call you forward when you feel low and lacking integrity, and to teach you how to be a better leader, a better lover, a better husband, father, partner. Men's work is communal learning. So I want to dispel any myths around men's work. It is not a fraternity. It is not advice giving, like you mentioned. It's not a place where men go to escape. It's where men go to explore, whether they're doing it communally or with teachers one-on-one.
I really like that. It's a place where men go to explore, not escape.
Yeah, a little one-liner. When people ask me, what is your men's work like? I'm like, imagine that you've landed on a different planet and somebody walks up to you and guides you through this new terrain. I'm that guide. I've been through this terrain on the other side of it. I can't possibly know what it means to be a man. I think philosophically speaking, we're all bodies of water walking in skin, and I happen to be in the skin of a woman and you happen to be in the skin of a man. But because we are relational beings, if you want to understand the impact of what it means to be a man, understand it from a lens outside of your own. Because when you understand it from a woman's lens, what masculinity means, from that lens, all of a sudden complements what you've understood masculinity to mean in the media, complements what you've understood masculinity to mean in your family circle, complements what you have understood masculinity to mean in your friend circle, in your culture, in your society, and so on. And so to me, men's work is the deepening, not the hacking of life. So that's what I have to say about men's work. How do men get involved with men's work? Depending on your region, you can just Google men's work area. You can speak to people that you know have participated in men's work. Something I like to do is use social media for good. So, for instance, I'm curious about getting a master's. So I posted, has anybody gotten their master's in family and marriage therapy or know a really good MFT? And I got dozens of resources. And then I scheduled 20-minute calls with each of them. So I really believe that if you're hungry enough for something, there's a reason for it. Our curiosities are not a coincidence. There are higher intelligence moving through us and captivating our attention, because attention is the highest resource we have. And our attention span has actually gone down 4 seconds in the last decade. So it used to be 12 seconds and now it's at 8 seconds. We're tied with, right? We're tied with a goldfish.
Never heard that stat before, but
yeah. And so, if this hunger to explore your masculinity or your perception of masculinity has come up once, has come up twice, has come up 3 times, that's a pattern. Pay attention. And at the very least, share that with beloved friends. And I think the next step is reading. There are some books that have been my greatest professors in this ride, from the cult classics of Iron John all the way to, I think, some pretty progressive books like written by Bell Hooks, The Will to Change. So you can always dip your toe in with literature, but really the conversation around this is where it comes alive, because a book can't talk back to you. How about for you? What would be your best advice since you went through this process?
I guess for me, I love podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I do not like being a part of podcasts.
You're doing so great.
Thank you. So I started listening to a few different podcasts. I just Googled, men's work with podcasts. And then I spoke to a friend of mine. Actually, how I found about the men's group here in Southern Adelaide was I had a friend of mine when I came back from that festival that I was talking about, and I told him how I was interested in men's work. And I thought, I didn't know there was anything. So I said, maybe I'll start a group up myself. And he was like, no, there's one going on here. It's been happening for years. I'll put you in touch with the guy who founded it. There was all from there. So it's just, I think you said having conversations about it is the first step. So, when I talk to people about men's work, there's a few people that will sound curious and ask me more about it. There's other people that don't ask me about it at all, which is fine. But I think you're right, Googling on the internet in your area, just talking about it to different people, Facebook sites. I think it's becoming a lot more common now that I think a lot of people would be surprised about how many people they know, whether it's physically or through social media or whatever it is, that has some sort of connection to men's work. Or so I just going back onto what you said about what men's work is. Yeah. I think, for me, it's really important to share that it's, like I said earlier on, that men's work is so many different things for different people. And there's not one way of defining men's work. So, like I said, men's work could be catching up with mates. It could be going to the pub. It could be going to a shed and making stuff. It could be sitting in a circle with set rules and set guidelines, sharing yourself. So, I guess it's just finding what it is that works for you and what you feel the most comfortable with doing, and just, reaching out and, I guess, looking around, seeing what's out there, and just having that conversation about it with other people.
Yeah, and I want to also stress this, because there's kind of the wounded healer aspect of men's work that has come up a couple of times. So it's kind of like finding a therapist. You might not hit it off with the first men's work attempt that you try. Yeah. Don't let that dissuade you. To your point, there's so many different styles and varieties. So if you try one out and it really rubs you the wrong way, it would be such a disservice to stop there. Keep going until it feels natural. One
of my favorite sayings is, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
It comes into play with this one, because, you're exactly right. It's just like if you go see a physio or a doctor, you might have one that rubs you up the wrong way, or you don't like their personality, or it doesn't click for you. And it doesn't mean that all doctors are bad and not good for you, or all physios aren't bad. You just, go around and find out one that works for you. So, Good point.
Yeah. And I think now more than ever, we need a space where we can be authentically ourselves and feel. I think human beings all need three things to thrive, three core feelings. We crave to feel seen. We crave to feel heard. We crave to feel that our voices matter. Men's work is a solution to those unmet needs and desires. Whether you do it in community or with one-on-one teachers, you are going to experience a level of self-awakening that might be confrontational at first, but it is truth. And you can spend the next decade denying it, or you can see it, embrace it, and use it to alchemize a version of yourself you only dreamed existed. That's, with the work that I do with men, when they come to me and I see them at the core, and that core starts to grow over time, and all of the facade starts to fall away. And then within months, they're stepping into the youngest, wisest self, because they've shed the skin of their immature masculine. And Nietzsche says, in order for a snake or a snake that does not shed its skin will perish. That's what men's work is. It helps you shed the skin. That's all.
I love a good analogy. That's great. Thank you.
This was such a joy.
There's so much more stuff. We could literally go on for hours. I feel like I've got so much stuff that I want to share and then get out. And I know I've got so much stuff that I want to draw from you. And so I absolutely appreciate you giving up your time all the way over in California on a Saturday night.
Giving it up. There's so many parties to go to these days, Yeah,
true. So thank you so much.
What if we left with a question to have people marinate on a question?
Ooh, okay. Putting me on the spot now. Let's how about you go first? Okay. And then we'll I like it.
I think, a question that helps feel an anchor into presence is, what is it like to be you right now?
Well, it's funny. My question was around that too. That came into my head. Similar, but not as poignant. Or my question was, I guess, around what is it that holds? Two questions. One, what is it that holds you back from being your true self, or what is it about your authentic self that you are not at peace with? What is that you're avoiding?
Which makes me think of, what is the payoff you get for staying stuck where you are? Right? Because all of human psychology, I think, is run on desire. And so if you're staying in a state that is making you chronically unhappy or stressed, there is a payoff you get, usually, for enabling that.
Yeah. I mean, every behavior there is a payoff for, isn't there? Oh. That's why we do anything, is because there is some sort of payoff at some point that we've.
This is why I'll likely be getting my master's in neurobiology, because I really want to understand the pleasure mechanisms on a neurological level, because there are things that we just can't explain with words, and then we accept them to be true when Atomic Habits, really great book, highly recommend, when we can change our habits. And when we can change our habits, it's because we've changed our beliefs around those habits. And when we've changed our beliefs around those habits, it's because we've changed our stories. So, as a storyteller, I really believe that storytelling is everything. It's how we think. It's how we process information. It's how we share wisdom. It's no coincidence that the limbic brain is the oldest part of the brain, and it's also the storytelling central of the brain. So a big part of what men's work is to me is about storytelling.
Yeah, and I think it's about understanding our own stories. So for me, it's about understanding my story and understanding there's a story that I'm playing out that I wasn't even aware of. Yeah. So the more I share what's going on for myself, the more I realize that, hang on, no, that's not my truth. That's a story that I've been living in. And there's constantly those things that keep popping up that, I've spent my life trying to avoid or I guess making excuses for. There's always little nuances of stories that keep popping up where I'm like, okay, that's not reality. That's just my own reality, and I can change that.
Totally. And you have, and I commend you so deeply for it, because you took something that could have been really destructive. And I know other friends that have left the pro leagues and they weren't able to rise to let that pain be a professor, to let that change be part of their evolution. And so I hope people find deep inspiration in everything that happens to you. You get to write that story in real time. And you chose to take everything you learned and loved about basketball and let it inform the kind of man that you wanted to be and how you wanted to show up differently with this masculinity than the masculinity that was ingrained in you for 16 years. That's massive. So you're like the poster boy for men's work.
Really, I don't know about that, but thank you for sharing. And I guess for myself with you, you went off and you were doing this type of work and really diving deep into it when I was still, like I said, running around playing basketball. And I guess when we kind of reconnected, you were that definite sounding board for me to find someone that had done this deep work, had dived deep into all of this stuff. And I was just getting started, and I was so curious, and I was able to just bounce a lot of stuff off you. And you'd gone further down the rabbit hole, so you were ready for the questions and just coming back with your beautiful energy and beautiful presence that you bring. So I'm really, really appreciative that we were able to reconnect the way we have and to just build a really beautiful connection and relationship, and for you to come on here and just share about all your stuff with men's work. And it's been really special for me. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for that super kind reflection. I mean, I think back to the first conversation we had at the Georgia Tech cafeteria in the Athletics Association. Yes. And you struck me as so different because you talked about how much you loved and missed your girlfriend, who I think was still in Australia. And so, to think that all these years later, we could be having a conversation like this speaks to the power of relational wealth, that your relationships become your greatest professors. And you have taught me and exposed me to things that I never would have found on my own. And every time I see you, I'm astounded by how you're like leapfrogging the system and going so much deeper. And it's not performative. It's really a quest of sincerity. And so I just tremendously honor that in you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're
all right. Enough honoring now. Enough honoring now. We're awesome people. We're the best. All right, everyone knows
Absolute
that now.
Best.
Yeah.
Well, where can people learn about you if they think, gosh, I want to learn about men's work and I don't know anyone in my circle? How can they contact you?
They can contact me. That's a good question, actually. I guess publicly, Twitter is probably the best way to get a hold of me. All my other socials are sort of private. I like to keep them private. So it's just Luke_Schenscher, SCHENSCHER. That's my Twitter handle. And then, I guess other than that, it's just reaching out to whoever it is in your own community that you feel like could give you some more information. What about yourself? So I'm going to do an introduction before this and talk a little bit about your what you do and where people can get in contact with you. But what's the best way if someone's listening to this right now and is just like, I really want to get a hold of Vika? What would you just tell them?
Best way is to go on my website, vikatalks.com, VIKATALKS.com. And then there's a good old contact form. Shoot me an email and I'll get back to you ASAP.
Awesome. Lovely.
Yeah. And it's Vika Talks on Twitter, Vika Talks on Instagram, all that jazz. But
all over the socials. All over the
place. Yeah.
I love it.
We can talk about our love-hate relationship with social media another time.
That's a whole another 2-hour podcast right there.
This is huge because I really haven't talked about my men's work publicly, maybe ever in this depth. And so it's a testament to feeling like the shame of being a woman doing this work is dissipating because it's actually a matter of life or death. Whether women decide to step up and become teachers in this will change generations moving forward. And, the second reason I did it is because you're so devoted to it. And I know that this podcast is actually going to be a force of good in your community and around the interwebs. And your story is so rich with wisdom.
We said no more honoring, honoring.
I just want to say this was the best use of time. And thank you for the past 91 minutes and 46 seconds.
91 minutes. Wow.
The first 20 we're setting up. The first 20 we were just setting up.
That's true.
True.
Awesome. Okay. Right. Thank you so much, Vika. Really appreciate your time. Lovely chatting as always.
Cheers. Bye.